Hello and welcome to the F1 News Zone, the show you take you through all the biggest stories in the world of Formula One right now. We are currently in a break between the Azerbaijan and Singapore Grand Prix, but which stories have been making the headlines in the pinnacle of motorsport this week? This week, McLaren team principal Andrea Stella has warned his team that Max Verstappen is a serious threat to their title chances in the remainder of the season, and Ferrari have responded to the team orders controversy in Baku last week. All that and a whole lot more is coming up in today's show. If you're watching on YouTube, skip to the timestamps in the video description to watch the story that you're most interested in. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Is Max Verstappen back in the title race in Formula One? A lot of people are questioning that after this weekend's event. Obviously, Verstappen has won the Azerbaijan and the Italian Grand Prix in dominant fashion, winning both by over 15 seconds. And in both of those, in particular, Baku this weekend just gone as well, McLaren were relatively nowhere. Of course, Piastri crashed out on lap 1 and Lando Norris finished in 7th place despite qualifying in 8th. He didn't really make that much progress through the field, really, when you think about it. And that has people wondering whether Verstappen can get himself back in this title fight, whether Red Bull have turned a corner, because it's not just Verstappen. It's also Yuki Tsunoda in the second seat as well. For the first time really this season, he looked competitive. He did a decent job in that car. I must admit, I was very impressed with how he did. Obviously, miles off his teammate, as you would expect really in general, given the qualities of the two drivers, but he was mixing it in the points. He was in 6th place and he deserved to be in 6th as well. He did a damn good job in my opinion. Almost got 5th ahead of Liam Lawson. So, is Verstappen back in the hunt? Well, the point gap now between Verstappen and Piastri is 69 points. Nice. Which is almost 3 victories in Formula One, over 2 victories. And when we were talking about Lando Norris being in the title fight last season, you know, the gap was less than that for the most part between Norris and Verstappen at this stage of the season. But there's a big difference, really, between Norris of last year and Verstappen of this year. Verstappen is a 4-time world champion. He knows how to get the job done. He knows how to make things difficult for opponents. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Norris has evolved this year. I think the Norris of 2025 is a much better driver than Norris of 2024. But what I'm getting at here is that Verstappen has the potential to win every single Grand Prix for the rest of this season. I don't think he will. But, you know, he's gone on these kinds of runs before. He's literally got the record for the most consecutive Grand Prix wins in history. And he's got like 67, I think, Grand Prix victories in general now. I mean, my God, he is absolutely... I mean, he's not that far off of Schumacher. You know, he keeps going at this rate. He's going to overtake Schumacher in 2-3 seasons' time. You know, that's how good he is. But is he back in the title hunt? That is the big question here. I got an article here on the F1Chronicle.com just to go over the kind of thoughts and feelings when it comes to this. Let's have a look. Max Verstappen has not ruled out a late push for the Formula One World Championship after cutting the gap to leader Oscar Piastri with a dominant display at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix this weekend. 2 weeks after his win in Monza, Verstappen took full advantage of Piastri's rare mistakes. The Australian crashed in qualifying and again on the opening lap of Sunday's race, leaving the Dutchman to claim victory and close within 69 points in the standings. Lando Norris could not make up the ground for McLaren, finishing 7th to see his own advantage over Verstappen reduced to 44 points. If you're wondering, the gap between Piastri and Norris is now at 25 points, exactly a Grand Prix victory. Verstappen's flawless weekend included pole position, fastest lap, victory, and led every lap, marking a 6th career Grand Prix slam, also known as a Grand Chelem, and moving level with Lewis Hamilton for the second most in F1 history as a result. Verstappen told reporters, quote, "This weekend has been incredible for us. Of course, last weekend was already great, but yeah, for us to win here is just fantastic. That's another great result, a bit unusual. This season has really been swinging left and right, but at least now, 2 weekends in a row, it's been going really well." End quote. Asked if he sees his chance to re-enter the Drivers' Championship fight, Verstappen was realistic but cautious. I mean, I don't rely on hope. 7 races to go and it's still 69 points. It's a lot. But basically everything needs to go perfect from my side and then a bit of luck from there, McLaren's side, I need as well, you know? So it's really tough. So I personally don't think about it. I just go race by race. What what I have been doing basically the whole season, just trying to do the best we can, try and score the most points we can, and then after Abu Dhabi, we'll know. McLaren team boss Andrea Stella acknowledged Red Bull's progress. Red Bull have improved, he told SiriusXM after the race. I think they have made a genuine improvement. They have had upgrades in Monza. They seem to have found a way to exploit these upgrades with the setup. I said that yesterday already, Max and Red Bull will be regular contenders for the wins, and definitely Max is a contender for the Drivers' Championship. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. We need to stay focused, improve, and we'll go again. So yeah, is Verstappen in the title fight? Well, if you ask the team principal of McLaren, Andrea Stella, he will say yes, but Verstappen is very much staying on the fence, and I think that's the smart thing to do. He doesn't want to go saying, yeah, I'm definitely in a title fight here, and then them go to Singapore and be miles off the pace, because that might happen. You know, Singapore is a very different track to Baku and also the Italian Grand Prix as well. It's a lot slower speed of a track, it's a lot hotter of a circuit. Let's not forget how cold it was relative to Azerbaijan, albeit of course it was rather warm in Monza a couple weeks ago as well. So yeah, I mean, watch this space really, but I think even now, I mean, 69 points is a lot. That is a big old gap, and that has only come about 25 points of that, and it getting down to that point from 94 before. That is all down to Piastri not finishing, something he hadn't done in over like a year and a half, you know, so it's been a long time since that occurred. So I'm very much keeping my expectations very much tempered at this point when it comes to that. But, you know, Verstappen's going to give it his best shot. He's going to go out there. He's going to have fun. I've said this many times. He's got nothing to lose at the end of the day. He's just going to have fun. You know, he's going to try and make it as awkward as possible for the McLarens. But could this be the start of a Red Bull resurgence? Possibly. You never know. Stranger things have happened. We saw how badly Red Bull dropped off last season, how big their pace drop-off was. Maybe they fixed whatever problems they had in both cars now. But let's see, guys. Your thoughts in the comments below. Is Verstappen in the title fight? I ruled him out quite some time ago, but did I do that a bit too soon? Did I jump the gun there? I want to hear what you have to say on this, as always, guys. So it's fair to say that Ferrari very much made a bit of a pig's ear of team orders during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So if you didn't see what happened, essentially, in the second stage of the race, Lewis Hamilton had better tyres compared to Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc was told to move out of the way for Hamilton so that Hamilton could challenge Lando Norris in front of him. Unfortunately for Hamilton and Ferrari, he was not able to really get that close to Lando Norris. So therefore, usually what happens, and what Hamilton has done in the past as well, he would swap the positions back before the checkered flag, before the finish line. Now, Ferrari did give this order to Hamilton, but they gave it to him so late that they were unable to swap. I saw them both side by side at the checkered flag, but that was already after they passed the finish line, so it didn't matter what happened after that. And Hamilton did not, in the end, give the position back, but it wasn't his fault. He was waiting for the order from his team, and the team gave it far too late for him to react to it. Bit of a farcical situation. I mean, it was over 8th for 9th, so Leclerc's not going to be wanting to tear up his contract and go somewhere else or whatever, you know. That's not what's going to happen here, but it's still an operational error, and a very basic one for Ferrari where they've messed up. Frederick Vasseur explained the situation here on the F1Chronicle.com, guys, so let's have a look at what happened here. Ferrari team principal Frederick Vasseur has defended the call to issue team orders during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix after Charles Leclerc was instructed to let Lewis Hamilton through in the middle stages of the race. Leclerc, who started on medium tyres, found himself ahead of Hamilton following the pit stops, but with Hamilton running the more durable hard compound, Ferrari felt he had a better chance of attacking Lando Norris ahead. Vasseur said, quote, "I think the situation was clear for us that Lewis had a tyre advantage and we asked Charles to let him go by to try and overtake Norris. On top of that, Charles had the issue with the recovery, and we are not at the top of the use on the engine. I think it was the best option for us to do this move," end quote. Hamilton was unable to make progress against the McLaren, and in the closing laps, Ferrari instructed the drivers to swap back. The execution was messy, with Hamilton crossing the line only 0.4 seconds ahead of his teammate. "We asked them to swap back, and it looks like Lewis had a misjudgment on the position of the start-finish line," Vasseur explained. The double points finish left Ferrari behind Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship, with the Silver Arrows moving 4 points ahead in the battle for second, thanks to second place from George Russell and fourth from Kimi Antonelli. But Vasseur insisted the real damage came in qualifying, not the race itself, saying, quote, "If we lost something, it was lost yesterday, not today," referring to Saturday in this case. Today we have started behind Norris, we finished behind Norris. It is like it is. It's more yesterday, I think, that we had the car. The driver was able to fight for P1, all through practice, and we finished P10 and P12. Lewis, FP1, FP2, FP3 went well. There was a good pace overall for the weekend. The first set in Q1 went well, and in Q2 he did 2 laps, but out of the pace. This is the main issue of the weekend, these 2 laps, because honestly, if you put him in the first 4, I think he finishes on the podium. I mean, given their pace in practice, it's not that far-fetched really, but as we see around Azerbaijan, qualifying is so important, and of course if you get stuck in a DRS train, it's impossible to overtake. Despite the disappointment though, Vasseur said that Ferrari's recent speed shows the team is moving in the right direction. We need to do a better job collectively, because to be P12 is not the result that we are expecting, but it's true that the last couple of weekends, if you consider this one, Monza, even Zandvoort, the pace was good. We are getting there now. One thing is to have the potential, the other is to deliver. We need to complete this execution to do our job. Leclerc had his accident during qualifying, and then Hamilton just didn't produce a good enough lap in Q2. It was so tight, and with the way the weather conditions were, it was entirely possible that even if Hamilton did get through to Q3, he might have quite crashed out as well. And with how tight it was, it's entirely possible that even if Hamilton did get through to Q3, he could have slid out as well. One Ferrari did it, and of course, we saw Piastri do it as well. So very difficult, very, very difficult. Not the best weekend. They're still in with that chance, still a long way to go in this season. As long as they're in and around where Mercedes are, they're going to be competitive going into the final race of the season. But if they get third, it'll be disappointing. It'd be very disappointing. It's bad enough they are second, or were second, with such a massive gap to McLaren, but to be third, that would show regression. Ferrari were almost Constructors' Champions last year, so we shall see what happens, guys. But yeah, panic stations at Ferrari. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below as always. Fernando Alonso, 44 years young and still racing in Formula 1. He's got a contract that ends at the end of next season in 2026, but will he extend? Will he stay at Aston Martin? Will he potentially go back to the Enstone outfit for one last hurrah with his manager Flavio Briatore? I really, really hope not. But I would love to see him in Formula 1 for a longer time. However, I realise that he's been in Formula 1 at that point for 25 years on and off, which is absolutely ridiculous to say the very least. But will he potentially extend his contract with Aston Martin? Will he get a choice? Those rumours about Max Verstappen eventually joining the team, they will come back next year when silly season goes into overdrive. Mark my words, that will happen, and we'll be here to cover it on the F1Chronicle.com as always. But here and now, let's have a look at what Alonso's been saying about his prospects of renewing his deal with Aston Martin beyond 2026. Full article on our website as always. Fernando Alonso has said his decision on whether to retire from Formula 1 at the end of 2026 depends heavily on Aston Martin's performance next season. The 44-year-old two-time world champion's contract expires next year, and he has said that he has already considered walking away, saying, quote, "If things go well, I think it's a very good moment to stop, because I've been chasing a competitive car and competitive racing for many, many years, and if I have that, I think it's a very good way to close my career." Before going on to explain, let's say that if we are competitive, there is more a chance that I stop. If we are not competitive, it will be very hard to give up without trying again, end quote. Alonso, who won his 2 titles with Renault in 2005 and 6, has not claimed a victory since the 2013 Spanish Grand Prix with Ferrari 12 years ago. His career since has been marked by battling in cars that lack race-winning pace. He finished runner-up in 3 times with Ferrari, missing out on titles to Sebastian Vettel. He finished runner-up 3 times with Ferrari in the World Championship, missing out on titles to Sebastian Vettel by narrow margins, before a disappointing spell at McLaren with a struggling Honda engine. Trust me, I remember those days. Very much a distant memory, thankfully now. After leaving F1 in 2018, Alonso found success in endurance racing and the Dakar Rally before returning with Alpine in 2021 and moving to Aston Martin 2 years later in 2023. He showed flashes of competitiveness with 6 podiums in his first 8 races there, but his team since has fallen back. Aston Martin currently sit in 7th place in the Constructors' World Championship, while Alonso is 14th in the Drivers' Championship behind Lance Stroll. Still, I'm just speechless. He needs to get ahead of him. He cannot finish behind Stroll at the end of the season. The apocalypse is gonna happen. The impossible has occurred. The universe's fabric itself will tear apart. Maybe I'm overblowing it a little bit, but it would be a big surprise. A key factor for Alonso is the arrival of Adrian Newey, who joined Aston Martin earlier this year after leaving Red Bull. The Spaniard described the legendary designer's influence as transformative, saying, quote, "He's an incredible person and everyone in the team is learning from him." End quote. With major regulation changes glooming in 2026, Alonso sees that year as a critical chance for Aston Martin to become a title contender, saying, quote, "I'm pretty convinced about that. The only thing is when. That's probably my only question mark for this project. In my case, driving in the last couple of years of my career, obviously, I want to taste the success of the Aston Martin project, but I know that everything takes a little bit of time to glue all the pieces together. Aston Martin fighting for and winning the World Championship is more or less guaranteed in the future. We have everything needed for a fight in the World Championship. Then to execute the job and win it, you need some external factors as well. You need a little bit of help from your competitors. You need a little bit of luck." And of course, Fernando Alonso may well be getting flashbacks, Vietnam-style flashbacks to his time at McLaren, because Aston Martin are going to become a works outfit for Honda effectively. They will be the sole team supplied by the Japanese outfit. I think it'll go better than the last time, but I think it'll go better because, Honda, they've been in Formula 1 with Red Bull now for quite some time, obviously, and they got their act together. They got a very competitive power unit in the back of that car, and Honda know what they're doing. The Japanese know what they're doing. To be honest, the more I see how well they were doing, the more I see how well Honda have done with Red Bull, the more I think to myself, McLaren were probably the problem. And the two have split, and McLaren eventually get their act together under Zach Brown. But yeah, I don't know about Alonso. I don't know I feel like he's playing the political game. He's playing the managing expectations there a little bit with that, because I feel like he would want to continue in Formula 1. If Aston Martin were good and competitive, he'd want to keep going to win that 3rd world title. That title that he'd been, at that point, trying to win for 20 years. It's been 20 years since he won his first title in 2005, guys. It's honestly incredible. Is he good enough to win a world title? Who knows? There's no real yardstick for Alonso. But he would be, 45? That's got to be the oldest champion since Fangio, if he manages to do it. I don't think Jack Brabham was that old when he won it in 67, whatever year it was when he won his 3rd title. So I think you'd have to go back to the days of Juan Manuel Fangio, 1957, something like that. So yeah, long time, and I think he'd want to stay. I think he'd want to stay if the car was good. I understand what he's saying, going out on a high, but a high for him would be to win the title. Whether he would be allowed to stay, though, that is the question. And I don't know if Lawrence Stroll want to keep around a 46, 47-year-old Alonso that right now is not exactly wiping the floor with Lance Stroll. He's done better than him. He's better than him in qualifying. In the race, though, there's not been a huge amount between them at times. There hasn't. Lance Stroll's been a lot closer. Is that Stroll improving? Is that Alonso getting worse? I think a bit of both. I think Stroll does all right in a good car, but in a bad car, he's absolutely useless. And that car right now is kind of mid. It's okay, I guess. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. So yeah, your thoughts in the comments below, guys. Will Alonso extend his contract with Aston Martin beyond 2026? I feel like if he doesn't get a deal with Aston Martin, he'll retire. I don't think he'll move anywhere else. I joked about him going back to Alpine and linking up with Briatore. I don't see that. That car's terrible. That team's a mess. No chance. But who knows? Fernando Alonso is a lot of things, but predictable is definitely not one of them. So it's fair to say there's been plenty of talk about Max Verstappen potentially winning the World Championship this year, which just seemed absolutely miles off happening after the summer break. He was about 100 points behind Oscar Piastri, if not even more at that point. But now that gap is really closing. Of course, Oscar Piastri retired from the previous round in Baku, and Max Verstappen managed to win it. Verstappen also won in Italy in both races in dominant dominant fashion too. And I think perhaps more telling is the fact that Yuki Tsunoda is looking a lot quicker as well. Tsunoda getting a very solid 6th place finish in Azerbaijan. So have Red Bull turned a corner? Have McLaren dropped off? Well, it's not just the drivers that are talking about this possibility either. The team bosses for these teams as well have been having their say as well, including Andrea Stella, the team principal of McLaren. Let's have a look at what Stella's been saying here about Verstappen's potential championship charge, a 5th championship in a row. Could he do it? It's unlikely, but, you know, Formula One, anything can happen, can't it? McLaren team principal Andrea Stella has doubled down on his belief that Max Verstappen remains a genuine threat in this year's Formula One Drivers' Championship, despite the Dutchman sitting a long way behind in the points. Verstappen, who won at Monza 2 weeks ago, stormed to pole in Baku after Oscar Piastri crashed out in Q3 and Lando Norris clipped the wall on his flying lap. Verstappen then converted pole into victory, cutting into McLaren's advantage in the standings. Stella explained after Baku, quote, "Red Bull have taken a new floor to Monza. They might have been setting up their car slightly differently. We hear now Verstappen is talking about grounding much more than he was before, so they might have unlocked performance, and I would not be surprised at all if Red Bull continue the streak they have started. Pole position in Monza, victory. Pole position here. Red Bull are a serious contender to win races and a very serious contender for the Drivers' Championship." End quote. Asked if he truly believed that Verstappen could snatch the title away, Stella replied firmly, "A firm yes. Can you write it in capitals? Because it was quoted in capitals." End quote. Despite McLaren's dominance, Verstappen's 6 pole positions this year are more than any other driver, but with 7 races remaining, he still trails Piastri by 69 points and Norris by 44. Stella warned that the situation is complicated by McLaren's 2 drivers competing against one another. Of course, he said when asked if Verstappen was still a danger. "We don't have to forget that first of all, he's Max Verstappen, world champion for the last 4 years, in a fast car. Like I said before, there are races where McLaren may not enjoy any advantage from a competitive point of view. And Lando and Oscar are always there, so they won't necessarily be maximising the points available. Sometimes it will be a little bit more points to Lando and a little bit more for Oscar, so they may take some points away from each other. We are very aware of this aspect, but we let them race because they are both deserving to push for their aspirations. Therefore, yes, Verstappen and Red Bull are in contention for the Drivers' Championship." And then there's some more quotes on Stella there going on about McLaren's current predicament as well. I mean, yeah, it's definitely one to consider. I mean, like I said in my previous videos, I don't really see Verstappen winning the championship. I don't, but he's inserted himself back into that conversation. It is no longer a completely done deal, particularly if things keep going like they are. I mean, we're coming up to Singapore, you know. Singapore's very difficult to overtake around. Max Verstappen has more pole positions this year than anybody else. Verstappen's got pole positions around a wide variety of tracks, you know. Street circuits, high downforce circuits, and obviously Baku and Monza, which are very high speed as well. So that car over one lap is a threat. It absolutely is a threat. So McLaren are right to be a little bit worried, a little bit rattled, but at the same time, McLaren's pace hasn't just gone away. It's just a really unique set of circumstances. They still finished 2nd and 3rd at Monza. Baku qualifying was absolutely insane, and the cards didn't fall for them. They fell right for Verstappen. They fell right for the likes of Sainz and the Mercedes drivers as well, who did much better. So, yeah, it's something to think about, but I don't think that he's a genuine threat personally right now. Very famous last words, but can he win the majority of the last races to finish out this season? I mean, I never thought he'd win 2 in a row like he has done, and in dominant fashion like that. So it's definitely possible, but I think that advantage that the McLaren drivers have built up, even if Red Bull have kind of turned a corner, I don't see him overtaking Piastri. Maybe Norris. Maybe you could get into 2nd, you know, particularly if Norris makes some more mistakes or is a bit lackluster in some races. I could see that. But yeah, your thoughts on this in the comments below, guys, as always. After Baku, we've been speaking a lot about how there's been a threat posed to the McLaren drivers in the World Championship in the form of Max Verstappen, who has won the last 2 races in dominant fashion. But there is another chink in the papaya armour, that being, of course, their pit stops, where they've had 2 poor pit stops over the last 2 races. Of course, their only pit stop during during the Grand Prix for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was a pretty poor one for Lando Norris and probably cost him 2 places to Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson as a result. And obviously they had a bad stop during the Italian Grand Prix as well, which caused its own controversy, but in the end did not alter the finishing positions of their 2 drivers. Of course, I know they swapped them back, but they still finished in 2nd and 3rd, so it didn't really change anything there. But it could have done. It easily could have done. And this is something that's a big worry from McLaren, you know. When you talk about pit stops, how important they are in Formula 1, how they're sub 2 seconds quite regularly now, and you're doing ones that are over 4, 5, 6 seconds, it's costing you a lot of time, even when you've probably still got the fastest car on the grid. I say probably because, again, Verstappen won in pretty dominant fashion in the last 2 races. He does that in Singapore, gets pole position in Singapore, he's probably going to win again. That's how quick he is right now. But let's have a look at what's been said about these pit stops, guys, and what McLaren are doing to try and remedy them. Full story here on the F1Chronicle.com, as always. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella has identified pit stops as a crucial area for improvement after back-to-back issues hindered Lando Norris at the Italian and Azerbaijan Grand Prix. At Monza, a slow left tyre change caused Norris to lose a place to teammate Oscar Piastri in the pits, sparking awkward team orders before the positions were eventually swapped back. In Baku, a problem fit in the front right wheel nut led to another slow stop, which Stella admits may have cost Norris as many as 2 positions and 4 points as a result. Stella said after the race, quote, "Definitely in terms of pit stops, that's an area where we have to concentrate our efforts. As a matter of fact, we need to keep working because there's some important performance that is available through pit stops, and we have seen that in the racing. If anything, it's getting tighter and tighter, so the impact of a pit stop now is more and more important," end quote. Stella added that McLaren must make changes in both execution and hardware, saying, quote, "Definitely for the remainder of the season and also thinking about next year's car, there's work to do from a pit stop point of view for what is the execution of the pit stop, but also the hardware, such as that executing a pit stop for our crew is more straightforward and more natural. There's still some interactions between the operator and the hardware that should be improved from a hardware POV." End quote. With Norris and Piastri separated by 25 points in the drivers' standings and Max Verstappen closing in after consecutive wins, Stella accepted that the recent problems could be more decisive. He confirmed the issues in Monza and Baku were not connected, but said they underline a broader need for improvement. No, they were different. This one in Baku was definitely more to do with the interaction between the operator and the gunning, but we know that from a hardware POV, we are not optimizing. This is not because we didn't want to, this is because you kind of learn on the way, and we know that there is room for improvement in terms of the equipment, in terms of the hardware on the equipment side of the car, so that we can make life a little bit easier for our pit crew. Sounds like they need some new wheel guns to me. I'm no expert, but, you know, I would say that's probably on the agenda before Singapore, I reckon. Yeah, I mean, you know, when it rains, it pours at the end of the day. You know, when problems happen, when people are a bit off balance, it was a very tricky weekend for McLaren in Azerbaijan, of course. Not quite as much in Italy. I've been more worried about that one, to be honest. But yeah, their last 2 pit stops during a Grand Prix have been pretty shaky, to say the least. So it is a worry, and yeah, fine margins. The grid is so close, but we'll have to see what happens, guys. Singapore, all eyes on the McLarens, all eyes on the pit crew as well, no doubt as well. But get your thoughts in the comments below, guys.